When was the last time the Kraken lost to a team without their best player, number 97, a true star of the game? Oh yeah, it was last game. What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to R&R.
Wait, what are you doing? That's fine. Unbelievable. I gotta lock these doors better. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to another R&R where the Seattle Kraken fall 5-4 to the Edmonton Oilers. They play pretty well, but I mean, honestly, not that bad of a loss, all things considered. It's important for the draft. You got Nashville today, and also the Flyers picked up an odd point in an overtime loss. Now, loser point either way, but the Kraken fight well and still end up making some progress in the standings for that first overall pick. So actually falling in the standings, but making the progress where they want to, getting closer to those draft odds. But we can save more on that for later, and maybe even get our special guest back in here for a bit after we get through the quicker recap of this game than usual. We'll just go over the goals that happened in this one, and there were a few. Again, a 5-4 game with only the one empty netter towards the end of it. For the Kraken, coming in, it's a fairly similar lineup to what we've seen recently, with the one particularly notable change. Well, I suppose there's really two notable changes. Chandler Stevenson out of the lineup in this game. He'll miss this one due to injury after leaving the game against the Wild early. Still no word on what that injury is. We'll get more details, it sounds like, after the team gets home and get some tests done to maybe even figure out themselves what exactly is going on and how long that'll keep Stevenson out. Again, hopefully he's okay, but it does give Shane Wright a chance to jump up into a more permanent role, at least for now, on that second line. At least in this game, he had on his wings Jaden Schwartz and Jordan Eberle. The first time that we've seen Schwartz away from Beniers and Kakko in quite some time now. So then taking Schwartz's spot on that Beniers line, which they had listed as the second line of this game, but effectively it turns out to be the first line. But it's Yanni Newman stepping up into that role as that line, with Newman in his first chance with some new line mates. He'd played all 4 games up to this point with the same 2 guys. Now he gets a chance up with Beniers and Kakko, and that line was easily the best line for the Kraken all night long. Maybe the score effects and advanced stats don't point to that, but certainly the eye test said that that was the best line for the Kraken throughout the night, and that definitely showed as they started to get some more ice time as the game went on, and the Kraken were once again chasing the game a bit from the Oilers. Which, as far as how we get to that point, even without the Oilers having either McDavid or Draisaitl, the second straight game where the Kraken faced a team without either of their top 2 best forwards. I mean, at least with the Wild, you can't argue that Kaprizov is their best forward, but I think there's an argument whether it's Boldy or Eriksson Ek that maybe is in that 2 slot for the Wild. They were missing both Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek, so certainly 2 of their best forwards. And now you come into this game against the Oilers where they're not only missing, those 2 guys that are their best forwards in Draisaitl and McDavid, but 2 of the best forwards, just players in general, that the NHL has to offer. So the Kraken catching the Oilers at the best possible time they could to try to have some success against a team that they really have not had very much success against at all in their history. In fact, this is now the 9th straight time that they've lost to the Oilers, with only 1 loser point in that stretch. But even without McDavid or Draisaitl, the Oilers still end up opening up the scoring in the same way that they usually do, on the power play. After a pretty back and forth start to the game, and that right line getting a couple of very good chances early, Wright just missing what would have been a tap-in goal off a pass from, I think it was Eberle, could have been Schwartz, one of the 2 wingers. And then just a shift or 2 later, getting another good chance that he just has roll off the end of his stick before he gets the shot off, so it ends up drifting harmlessly wide of the net. Through all of that, we get through the first half of the first period without any particularly dangerous chances that end up on net. A couple of near misses, like I said, for the Kraken. But the Oilers get that first chance with the man advantage, and although it does take them just about the entire 2 minutes to make it happen, they do eventually find the back of the net, and it comes off of a play where Corey Perry is just allowed to stand in front of Decord from one side of the net to the other. He just camps out, screening Decord all the way, and then just as he starts to clear out so Decord gets a look at what's happening, well, Montour ends up being right in the way of a shot that comes immediately. Decord has to lean out to one side to get around Montour to see the shot. The shot goes the other way, over his glove hand, and into the top corner to give the Oilers that 1-0 lead late on that power play. But not long after that, the Kraken get a chance on the power play of their own, and they make much quicker work of it. Even if not quite as smooth of work of it, the puck gets cleared a couple of times pretty quick to start that power play, as it looks like it's not going to go anywhere. But then through the neutral zone and into the offensive end, a rush chance for pretty much just that first line, or the Beniers line, whatever line that happened to be in this game. all on this same power play unit. They get into the offensive end. A shot from Newman just on the outside of the slot in the faceoff circle is an absolute bullet, a little bit too much for Skinner to handle. It rebounds off of him straight out front, where Beniers has worked his way around a couple of defenders for the Oilers, gets the rebound shot off. Skinner also able to handle that one, but it trickles out to the side, where also crashing the net is Kaapo Kakko. He taps it in to give the Kraken the power play goal and tie the game at 1. And say what you want about the Kraken losing to probably the worst Oilers lineup they've put out on the ice in a few years, just alone with the absence of McDavid and Draisaitl. But as far as the future is concerned, which at this point in the season is all we really care about for the Kraken, it could hardly happen in a better way. 3 of your youngest players working as a group on a rush and all crashing the net to make this goal happen. A fantastic goal for the Kraken. It also helps that it's on the power play. Even if it isn't your traditional power play goal, it just kind of comes off the rush, so it's the type of thing that could have easily happened on 5-on-5. Still, the Kraken take that lead and nearly extend it before the period's up. The fourth line out there, which in this game does feature both John Hayden and Ty Cartier, alongside obviously Mikey Aziamont, but Cartier and Hayden both playing in this game with the absence of Chandler Stevenson. And they had a couple of chances in this first period of all getting up to the net themselves, crashing it, making some chaos happen, which in general is just nice to see, even if in this particular case, if I'm being perfectly honest, I kind of feel like the expected goals were a bit generous for how this play really turns out. Either way, the fourth line at least getting some chances. Still, we go to that first intermission with the game tied and head to a second period, which is kind of the second period that we've come to expect for the Kraken. They don't necessarily get run over by the Oilers or anything like that, but on the scoreboard, the Oilers do open a bit of a gap, which all starts at the end of another power play, though this time early in the period, and this time it's a Kraken power play that really goes nowhere for the Kraken. And honestly, they kind of give the best chances to the Oilers, or at the very least, tempt fate a couple of times with what could have easily turned out on 2 occasions to be breakaways shorthanded for the Oilers. Neither of those end up working out for Edmonton, but just as the power play is ending, it's Nugent Hopkins who gets another rush chance. Not a breakaway, it's kind of a one-on-one and he's forced to the outside. Nonetheless, he's able to get a shot off as he gets to the low face-off circle, and it just bloops over the shoulder of Decord and into the top of the net behind him. I gotta be honest, at the time, it seemed like it got deflected by something, and it looked to me like it was just going to go harmlessly over the net, but it just hits the back of it and goes down past that goal line. As it turns out, while it looked at the moment like Decord just gave up the worst goal he's ever given up in the NHL, the shot from Nugent Hopkins ramps off the blade of the stick of Montour, who's in front of it, and just another bad bounce. So I suppose in that way it's somewhat similar to one of the goals Decord had to go against him in his previous start in Chicago, the shot from Bedard early in that game on the power play that goes off the shin of Larson and perfectly into the top corner. Decord recently not only has looked maybe a bit tired, or certainly not the sharpest that we've seen him, certainly not the elite goaltender that we saw him early on in the season, but also has had some pretty bad puck luck as well. But either way, still at this point in the game, this gives the Oilers the 2-1 lead on another chance that, while not technically shorthanded, is the Kraken just a poor power play where they tempted fate one too many times, and it somehow finds a way into the back of the net. Though, like before, the Kraken once again are able to respond to this goal pretty quickly. At 5-on-5, it's once again Kaapo Kakko, who has a nice play defensively in the Kraken end, gets it out to Yanni Newman, and then just breaks for it down the ice through the neutral zone. Newman, some quick thinking, gets the puck up to him through a couple of Oilers. Kakko in free on the breakaway, skates straight at the goaltender, and then just at the last second, a quick move to the backhand and chip into the net to get over Skinner's pad and give the Kraken their second goal of the game. Kakko, his second goal of the game, and Newman, his second assist of the game. And things are suddenly looking like they're going pretty well for the Kraken. And building off that, the Kraken even get a couple of decent chances to take the lead here over the next few minutes, but they aren't able to, and eventually, as we get into the back half of the second, it's a breakdown in their own end in the second period. I know it's something that we've seen plenty so far this season, but it happens at least the one more time, as the Kraken, specifically the fourth line, have their first big blunder of the game. It's Skinner, specifically Jeff Skinner. Stuart Skinner isn't allowed past center ice, but Jeff Skinner allowed completely wide open in the middle of the slot. He collects a pass and then has all the time he needs to pick a spot, take his shot, and beats Decord to give the Oilers back that lead. They also then quickly get a power play, which the Kraken do a good job of killing this one off. But then they just feel like they want to continue to test this Oilers power play without McDavid and Draisaitl, as Vince Dunn heads to the box with a double minor for high sticking, and while the Kraken kill off the first 2 minutes and get pretty decently into the next 2 minutes, eventually the Oilers do score on that one as well. And for the second time in the game, it's a goal that comes off a shot from Decord's blocker side through an unchecked screen in front of him. This time, I'm pretty sure it was Hyman screening, and this time it is Hyman who is really blocking Decord's vision of this shot. It gets through him into the near side to give the Oilers their second power play goal of the game. Also, Nugent Hopkins his second of the game, and late in the second, the Oilers have a 2-goal lead, which could just as well set up the Kraken for their 10th multi-goal comeback win, which as we get into the third period was still the score 4-2, which as it turns out, with yet another good third period from the Kraken, they nearly are able to make that happen. And to be honest, I thought they were actually going to be able to pull it off, or at least force overtime, as the first goal comes still fairly early on in the third period, and it comes from who's turned out to be a fairly unlikely suspect in Andrei Burakovsky, as that third line in this game with Burakovsky and McCann, as well as Tolvanen on the other wing, McCann as the center of that line, get into the offensive end, establish a bit of a rotation. McCann drops it to Burakovsky as he crosses to the other side, and he just kind of circles from one side of the offensive end to the other along the blue line, gets down to the faceoff circle, and fires an absolute bullet into the top corner of the net near side. A perfectly placed shot to give Burakovsky just his 7th of the season and bring the Kraken back to within 1. But unfortunately, the Kraken are just not really able to build much momentum off of that goal from Burakovsky. The next 5 to really more 10 minutes of the middle part of this period don't go much of anywhere for the Kraken. As we get into the final few minutes, eventually the Kraken late in the period, just as you're starting to think that they might start thinking about pulling Decord a little bit early, they end up with a power play, which forces their hand a bit. It doesn't necessarily force their hand, but it's as good a chance as they're going to get. So they pull Decord to start that power play for the 2-man advantage, 1 goal and the tie game to potentially get to overtime. But not long into that power play, after 1 missed chance, the second chance doesn't miss. It's Nugent Hopkins who hits the empty net for the hat trick. Yet another Oiler getting a hat trick against the Kraken on an empty net goal, which the Kraken have seen a little bit too much of in these first few seasons of their existence. Either way, that does seem like it's going to put the game out of reach. But as the power play continues, it's not long after that goal. In fact, it's just 14 seconds later as the Kraken get quickly down the ice off the ensuing faceoff. Dunn up to McCann, deep into the offensive end. McCann across the seam to 2 players on the other side. It's both Schwartz and Wright who have their stick in the right place at the right time. But it hits Schwartz's stick first and goes into the far side of the net to give the Kraken their 4th goal of the game, pulling them once again back to within 1 with still over a minute left on the clock. And if they can get Decord pulled quickly, a decent chance at getting this game tied and sending it to overtime 5-5. But that just never quite happens, and we do get to that final score of 5-4. The Kraken unable to have that heroic last goal as we've seen a few times this season. And at least in this case, it does mean that they don't even get a chance at that loser point. And importantly, they do end up with 0 points in the standings. And just like that, through the magic of editing, RJ is back from the beginning. If you don't know him, RJ from Emerald City Hockey, also on YouTube, Twitter, a bunch of other places. Why don't you tell them where you're at and how to find you if you want more of you after this?
Yeah, well, on YouTube, our channel is Emerald City Hockey, and then on social media, at Emerald City HKY.
Yeah, and they do a fantastic job of following the team. RJ and his other half Dylan, or other half hockey-wise anyway, Dylan.
I was going to say, the ring's not for Dylan.
Yes, they do a fantastic job over there at Emerald City Hockey. If you're still on Twitter or X, they are one of the better follows over there and plenty of other places. But as far as this game is concerned, again, a 5-4 loss that, while disappointing for those of us that would like to see some wins, it's always more fun to watch our team win. It does help the Kraken quite a bit as far as that whole draft situation is concerned. And it also turned out to be a game where, especially some of those things that we've been watching here towards the back half of the season in the younger players, it went pretty well for the Kraken.
It did, and I think if you're going to lose games down the stretch here, you want to lose fun, you want to lose in regulation, and you want to lose in a way where the young players step up and contribute to what success you do have in that loss, and I think the Kraken did all 3 of those things.
Absolutely. So the Kraken have well, one of the big parts of those young players stepping up and doing a good job in this game is the. Well, they didn't say it was the first line on the broadcast. They said the Shane Wright line is the first line. So Wright, maybe his first look on the first line. But he ends up with both Schwartz, who stays on the first line, I suppose, and Eberle, with then the what turns out to be the first line in the game of Matty Beniers and Capo Caco. They stay together. They've been playing great since Caco came to Seattle. And then Yanni Newman comes in with them. So that line turns out to have a great game. 4 points among them. Sorry, actually 5 points between them, with Newman getting 2 assists, Caco 2 goals, and Beniers ends up with an assist as well. So a fantastic night for the young players. The Kraken, again, importantly, don't pick up a point in the standings. And even Wright still ends up with a fair amount of ice time. Not as much as we'd seen in the previous 2 games, just under 15 and a half minutes. But it is almost a more valuable, and to me anyway, 15 and a half minutes, as he spends pretty much all of it with one line. We saw him get the 17:42 and then almost 20 minutes in the last 2 games, but it was pretty broken up, starting on a 4th line and bouncing around some other lines. So getting a little more consistency from Wright, and his game was up and down. He got some chances early on, but yeah. And then from what we saw from the first line, just especially Newman, like what did you think of what you saw from Newman in that new line that he's been with one line the entire time and now with a couple of new players?
I think he fit in remarkably well with Matty Beniers and Capo Caco. I mean, you see it on that quick pass he makes for a breakaway for Capo Caco on the second goal. That's a play where you have to think very quickly and be in sync with your teammates. And I thought Yanni Newman absolutely was that. And then you see it on the first Capo Caco goal where Newman's shot just too hot for Stuart Skinner to handle. They crashed the net with Matty Beniers. I know it was on the power play, but it was really those 3 guys all working together. And then Capo Caco finishes it off. And they all kind of had that net front drive. And even if Capo Caco didn't get that puck, if it squirted out the other way, Yanni Newman's probably there to collect his own rebound. So I loved how he fit in with that line. It's good to see him be able to succeed in a spot other than that very specially crafted line with Jared McCann at center that the Kraken had put him in.
Yeah, and also just exciting to see him succeed with 2 young players. This is a group of 3 guys that could be together for quite some time, especially if this effectively tryout here at the end of the season at the NHL level, and then whatever he does, if he ends up earning that role through training camp and preseason next year, we'll probably get a couple games here to see if this is a line they might take a look at going into next season. That obviously is a discussion for farther down the road, but especially that the first goal that they had on that power play, yeah, it was a power play, but it was also off of a rush. It wasn't like this is a setup that they had and they were really taking advantage of the extra man. They came into the offensive end with some heat, and Newman with that shot, again, like RJ said, too hot to handle, rebounds out. Beniers is already crashing the net, and then Newman follows up his shot. Caco on the other side. You have all of a sudden 3 Kraken players right around the net, which is, I mean, we've gone through large chunks of the season wanting just 1 Kraken player around the net, and you get 3 of your youngest players right there. It's, yeah, again, one of those things you take away from a game that, you know, for especially the people that like the tank, not only do you get a tank, but you get those future pieces making some big differences. But then on the other side of things, while there was a lot of good stuff from those young players offensively, from the team in general, we still have to get to a 5-4 loss somehow, and that comes on the back of some not so great back checking from the Kraken, and just not necessarily a lot of great play in their own end, a lot of holes in their defensive game, and we saw that in some of those screens. I mean, you talk about their play around the net. We saw them get to Edmonton's net, but around their own net.
Yeah, not much effort to get those players in front of the net out of there where they're not screening Joey Daccord anymore. And that's something that we've seen from the Kraken all season. They don't have a whole lot of defensemen who are both big and physical, and the effort to get them out of the front of the net just wasn't really there tonight. And also just some basic breakdowns. They couldn't really do anything about a basic cycle that Edmonton was running. You see that on goals where guys left wide open kind of in the slot where they can finish on that. And it's just something the Kraken couldn't handle, but they need to be able to.
And honestly, like, this is one of the things, it's frustrating. And there's, some comments RJ and Dylan were kind enough to let me guest star as well on their post-game live. So if you do, want some extra post-game after any Kraken game, they're live immediately after all Kraken games, so feel free to jump over there and watch that. One thing that was mentioned over there was maybe some people not feeling as high about the future of the Kraken because these same mistakes that we've seen defensively now under 2 coaching staffs to different degrees, and maybe some of the details are a little bit different, just seem to keep coming back with this team, and now we're seeing it with the younger players. But honestly, I'm not personally that worried about, at least at this moment in time, with younger players, and Matty Beniers is an exception. We still see it sometimes from him. But the defensive side of the game is usually the part that comes a little bit later on in their development. And in this game particularly, for kind of the first time this season, especially here at the late part of the season where it's something that we've really wanted, we've already talked about the Shane Wright ice time issues, and that's been up and down here and there. I mean, he started to get some more ice time, but even then it was broken up between 2, 3, sometimes 4 lines in a game. This time he's a little bit more consistent. At the end of the game, though, the 4 of the top 5 forwards in ice time were the young players. Capo Caco, Matty Beniers actually has the most ice time of any Kraken in this game with 23 plus minutes. Yanni Newman and Shane Wright are 4 of your top 5, with Jaden Schwartz the only other guy breaking up that group. And when you have that much ice time with that young of a group, you're going to have some defensive mistakes in their own end, and especially with a new line. I think at least 1, maybe 2 of the goals against did come with that Beniers line out on the ice. They're still, I mean, Newman is getting used to playing with those guys. There's going to be some holes in that defense. So, yeah, I think you can forgive some defensive mistakes from them while still seeing that promise offensively.
It comes with the territory, and I think even defensively, too. You had Riker Evans up with Brandon Montour on the second pair tonight, and he's been going through a bit of a rough patch himself, I'd say. Yes. And, he was out there for some of the Edmonton goals as well. So these are the kind of things that you're going to work through late in a lost season, where really it's about the young guys and their development. And that trajectory isn't always a straight line. You're going to go through some mistakes, and the idea is to learn from them.
So there is going to be some frustrations, especially on the defensive end of things. But that comes with what was mentioned here just a little bit ago, losing fun. And you know what? Especially after how that Minnesota game went, I think we can agree that losing fun is a little bit better than, well, that game.
I will take this game over that game every single time.
The one other potential big frustration coming out of this game, though, is that it is the second game in a row for the Kraken where they're playing against a team that's missing certainly their best, but probably even their 2 best offensive scorers. In the previous game against the Wild, they're missing Kaprizov as well as Eriksson Ek, and certainly in this game, there's no arguing that McDavid and Draisaitl are not only the 2 best players on that team, but are 2 of the best players in the NHL. And the Kraken, even in spite of playing some younger players and giving ice time to guys like Yanni Newman that certainly would not be seeing it if the Kraken were still in a playoff run, it's still games where you'd like to see a little bit more, maybe even see the Kraken pulling out some wins against teams that just don't have their full firepower.
And if this was early in the season, I would be on them about a big missed opportunity to pick up 2 points against a team clearly without its 2 best players. But at this point of the season, right, you have to focus on the little things, how the younger players are doing. The points, in fact, they probably just hurt you as far as draft position.
Absolutely.
But I think it is an important takeaway to look at the long term, knowing that this Kraken team, as constructed as they were playing, still couldn't get past a very depleted Oilers team, and also did it in the manner they did, allowing as many goals as they did. The Oilers probably tack on at least 1 or 2 extra if McDavid and Draisaitl are in the lineup. I think even saying pretty conservatively 1 or 2, just given the lanes that were open for them.
Yeah, and there's the Joey Daccord factor too. I mean, we haven't talked about it a ton, but it's obvious that Daccord is, for whatever reason, he's not the Daccord that we saw for the vast majority of the season, and I do think there's some burnout there. The Kraken rode him hard through the first 2/3 of the season, well into the point where, let's be honest, they were kidding themselves that they still had a playoff chance, and it now seems like they're starting to accept that that's actually not there. And I mean, I think they basically, up until the point where they're mathematically eliminated, wanted to believe that it could happen. Now we're seeing Grubauer's getting some starts here and there, but even in the ones that Daccord gets, he just doesn't look as sharp as he does. And yeah, there are some fluky goals in there as well. We saw the one off of the stick of Montour in this game that just kind of bloops over his shoulder into the net. And we saw the one off of Larsson's leg on that power play from Bedard. So it's not all on Daccord, but there's just kind of some things that probably will be, I would say, cleaned up going into next season, you would hope. I mean, Daccord will be at least fresh, and the team will be back to putting out the guys they think are going to make them win, and not just trying to lean on the production of young players that are just getting their feet wet in the NHL.
I think it was easy to take for granted just how good Joey Decord was playing earlier this season. I think a lot of the way the Kraken were playing relied on him to play elite level hockey. And if it's anything less than that, I still think he's playing very well, but anything less than elite, and it usually ends up 4 or 5 goals in the back of the net the way they're playing defensively.
Finally, though, that will bring us to the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you do want to help decide Kraken 3 stars after every game, you can support a little bit more than you already are by going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. There'll also be the channel Kraken Awards that you can help decide at the end of the season, the ones that will have some competition with them anyway. As far as these 3 stars in this game, the first 2 I think are pretty obvious. I think we're going to all be in agreement there. Kaapo Kakko, I think we'll go with the first star in this game. 2 goals. It's not that hard of a decision, honestly. Fantastic game from Kaapo. His best game in a while. That line with Beniers and Schwartz had started to cool off a little bit, and I don't know if it was just Newman getting thrown in there that put some life in them, or if it was the fact that their competition was, well, it helped that I think the right line was sent out there first, and even outside of Draisaitl and McDavid not being there, facing, for a chunk of the game, not the top competition for once might have helped a little bit. But still, out of it, Kakko, 2 goals, has the power play goal, crashing the net. Yeah, it just kind of bounces to him, but you have to be in that right place to get that luck. And then the second goal, as we talked about, fantastic pass from Newman to get it to him. But then the finish on that goal. I mean,
no pun intended, or did you mean to go with that?
Finish connection, and then the finish.
Yeah, quite a bit of finish on that goal. I mean, that deke from Kaapo Kakko, really impressive to go to the backhand that quickly and to execute on it so smoothly. You wonder if maybe he gets a look in the shootout a little bit down the line, if there are any shootouts left in the season.
Yeah, considering how they do it in the shootout, I have to think you give him at least... He has had one, now that I think about it, actually. And it didn't go. It was one of the ones where they went 0 for 3. But
do that move.
Give him another... Do that one again.
That one.
Just go straight at the goal. None of this, meandering around, and then just go at him. Make him think fast.
Exactly. And I think also much in the same way that he got the best out of Matty Beniers when they were put together earlier this season when he was acquired, I think he also helped get the best out of Yanni Newman. He really just brings the best out of other players.
Yeah, and speaking of Yanni Newman, second star, again, fairly obvious decision. It's got to be Newman again. He continues to play. And we didn't notice him very much, especially in the game against Minnesota, though, let's be honest, there wasn't a lot of Kraken players. We noticed a ton in that game. But he's been kind of the last 2 games a little quieter for Newman. This game, though, again, stepping into that line, fantastic. A couple of very nice plays. The shot on that power play that is, too much for Skinner and causes that rebound that Matty gets into that spot to get off and ends up leading to that goal. And then, even as RJ mentioned earlier, his ability to follow that up as well. He didn't just fire off that shot and then turn into a spectator for whatever else happened. And he doesn't end up playing a role. But if Beniers' shot ends up bouncing out to the other side, he got down into that play and was ready there for a potential other rebound. And then even that pass to Kakko for the breakaway goal is a pass that, he's hitting a guy in stride for the breakaway, which is already a nice pass even if there's no one around. But he does kind of thread the needle between 2 Oilers players to make that pass happen and just to have the heads-up play to get that pass out there quickly enough to where he can get Kakko on the breakaway before he hits the blue line. They make it look easy, but that's a harder pass for especially the speed of an NHL game for a guy that's still getting used to the NHL game, just his 5th game, to be able to make that play happen at the speed that it needs to happen at for Kakko to be able to get in there on that breakaway. So another fantastic game from Newman as he continues to prove that he might just be staying with this team long term. Yeah, he'll go back down to the AHL and play with Coachella Valley for this playoffs, but that playoff run might be the last of his AHL days before he plays with the Kraken next season. So that brings us to then the third star, which is a more difficult decision. We went back and forth a little bit on who we thought was the third star. Patreon, while very helpful with the first 2 stars, did agree with us on both of those. And then the other bit of advice that was agreed on over there is that we don't like the Oilers very much. And in particular, that goal horn. I've mentioned it pretty much every time the Kraken play the Oilers in Edmonton. The day that they shut out the Oilers in Edmonton will be a glorious day indeed when I don't have to listen to that god-awful noise. Anyway, that having been said, the third star of the game, we both kind of felt like had to be someone on that 4th line, and I don't personally know if there's one that stood out a ton over the others, but if I had to pick one, it'd be Mikey Aziamont. And one thing that I have noticed in the short time that Aziamont has been a Kraken, and we probably won't be seeing him in a Kraken jersey next year, but I don't know if we've ever seen this many wraparound chances. I think Aziamont already in this short time might have as many wraparound chances as the Kraken have had in the last 2 years as a team. And that was what almost led to another goal for them.
Yeah, I think you might be right on that. Really, it hasn't been since Ryan Donato that we've seen a Kraken player that's been fond of that regular wraparound. And he does set up that chance that, well, the puck goes in. John Hayden does end up knocking the puck in. He does hit it in with the pad of Stuart Skinner. So I think it's the right call that they reverse that. It was goalie interference. But Eyssimont sets up the whole chance by being opportunistic, going for that quick wraparound. And he also had just a few whacks at that puck before Hayden got in there as well. He didn't give up on it. He never gives up on these plays. And I do like the element that he brings to the fourth line. And you look at the advanced numbers on Money Puck, Natural Stat Trick. I mean, they did a fantastic job tonight.
Yeah, that fourth line had a few of those too. I mean, we talked about how nice it is to see Kraken players going to the net and creating that chaos around those dangerous areas, making the goaltender's life hard. And I mean, that fourth line did a lot of it in this particular game. And again, Eyssimont probably not long for the Kraken roster, but it's a style of play that would be nice if it rubbed off on some other players. Who that ends up being, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it was good to see, and well worth, I think, getting the third star in this game. Obviously, some other players that played well. Matty Beniers could have easily been the third star in this one. A fantastic game. He does have a point that actually sticks onto the score sheet, but it felt like it was going to be a little bit boring to just put the whole three guys on the line. Not that we haven't done that before here, but again, and Shane Wright could have. He had it there. He had it there to be a star in this game. A couple of missed opportunities early on in the game with Wright.
Yeah, if he didn't whiff on a couple of those early shots, I mean, he could have easily had a couple goals, and we're talking about him here, maybe even vying for second or first star in this one. But I think you mentioned earlier, he had an up and down game in that order. I think up and then down, and that was kind of the night for him.
Yeah, so I think we'll go with those three stars, the two obvious ones in Kakko and Newman, and then we'll go with Eyssimont as the third, but take your pick of that fourth line. Maybe between Newman and Hayden. Cartier had a decent game, but I think Eyssimont and Hayden were the two most noticeable on the fourth line, even if it was good to see Cartier back in the lineup again. Again, Stevenson not playing in this game, and still no word on what his injury is or how long that could take. In as much as I hate to say it, hopefully they just kind of take their time. Hopefully he's okay, for one thing, but it would be nice if they take their time there. For one, he has to be a part of the team for quite a while, so you don't want to risk making whatever it is worse. And it's kind of nice to see Wright getting a little bit more time with one line consistently and not being relegated to the fourth line and then wherever they can get him throughout the rest of the game. Other than that, I think we can call it for that one. As always, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Your thoughts on the game, just generally on the Kraken at this point, their outlook as far as that whole draft race goes and where they could end up. It's a pretty tight group there. One thing we didn't spend a lot of time on, I said we would at the beginning, so we'll just do it now. The Kraken, as far as those draft odds are concerned, this loss does help them. Nashville winning today, so they pick up 2 points. And the Flyers also pick up a point with an overtime loss. They are 1-8-1 in their last 10, so the Flyers might be challenging the Kraken there for one of those top 5 spots in the draft order. We also had Pittsburgh, who's kind of in that mix as well, won yesterday, or 2 days ago as of when you're watching this. So it's still a race where the Kraken want to be losing some games. Unfortunately for them, the schedule, I think, kind of lines up where they're going to lose some games, especially if they are going to be giving these younger players a lot more opportunity to prove themselves. And, well, letting younger players play that much is going to lead to some mistakes. And for the Kraken, that is a combination that I think we'll happily take. Some experience for those younger players and not too many points in the standings, so you get a better chance to get another good young player. With that, though, as always, thank you for joining. RJ, any last thoughts or one more shout out for where to find you over on wherever?
Well, thanks for having me on. That's what I want to say.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me watch the game at your house. This was
Yeah,
a fun
it was a fun
time
one.
watching the game with you outside the press box. It's a nice, different little experience here, and just fun talking about everything with you.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for joining. I mean, let me know what you guys think of having some special guests on. We'll maybe do some more of this in the future.
Leave the doors unlocked more often.
Exactly. And especially for games where, we could use a little bit more excitement around here and mix things up a little bit here at the end of the season. Again, let me know what you think. Check out RJ and Dylan over at Emerald City Hockey if you haven't already. I mean, if you haven't, I'd be kind of surprised for one. But again, until next time, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless, and go Kraken.